I'm Rob Wolcott, co-author of Proximity, How Digital Technologies Compel Value Creation Ever Closer to the Moment of Actual Demand. No industry will be changed more so than manufacturing. We're at the very beginning, the knee of the curve of a transformation of global supply chains. Why is that? Because for the past 2 centuries, we've been building supply chains reliant on scale manufacturing at a distance. The larger my plant, the lower my costs. Over the next 2 decades, this model will be transformed. And more than anyone else, it will be transformed by technologists and visionary entrepreneurs who are making it happen. Visionary entrepreneurs like Jay Rogers, founder of Haddy. Jay, thanks so much for having me here in St. Petersburg.
Rob, it's a pleasure to have you as our guest. And I think as a spirit, even when you're not here thinking about things, it's a delight to know that you are out there and striving for the same things that we are.
Well, speaking of same things, I've been thinking about this proximity concept since 2014, so over a decade ago, and it was very early at that time. But then later on, our good friend Brian Collins introduced us because he read the book, he gave an endorsement, and he, of course, his endorsement was buy the damn book. We'll see if that works. But he immediately said, you need to meet Jay Rogers, because Jay has been making this proximity thing happen for the past couple of decades, and now it's really catching fire. Where are we? What is Haddy?
Haddy's a furniture manufacturer. That's simple. We use 3D printing in order to be able to power furniture manufacturing, to be able to make it close to customers and make it faster. But at its essence, we're a furniture manufacturer.
But you can do things at Haddy that could never have been done before by the rest of the industry. And I'm just reflecting on my own experience. My wife, Ada, and I outfitted one of the rooms in our home, and we ordered some furniture we love. We're so excited. And we're excited it's going to show up 5 months from now. That's not how it works here at Haddy. Why is that?
Well, what's broken about the furniture industry and why we exist to be able to solve that is that the furniture industry is slow, it is unresponsive, and it is unsustainable. And so really what that means is it takes 52 weeks to design and then see a piece of furniture on a retail shelf because it comes from so far away. It is unresponsive because of that, meaning like a customer taste would change, but a manufacturer in Vietnam can't make that happen fast.
Right.
And then the unsustainable part of it is that the dirty little secret of the furniture industry is that we chrome things and we paint things and we glue things and we stick things together with dissimilar materials that really just are horrible for the earth. And 99.9% of furniture, 99.7% of furniture goes into landfill at the end of its life. It doesn't get recycled. And with those chemicals and different materials in it, that's really bad for the earth. Well, we're in the world's largest direct-to-part 3D printing factory, period. And Haddy is in St. Petersburg, Florida. And I'm sure we'll talk more about what that means and why. But where we are within our factory is in the really the experience center. So I would like to break down a little bit more about what that means.
Sure.
So for us, a microfactory is really the name of our factory. And that name comes from a treatise that I read in the late 90s, which was about microfactory retailing. And I don't think that the name is a term of art. I think it is just simply to describe the difference between the Lowell and Lawrence mills of the New England manufacturing renaissance and what it means to be small enough and tidy enough to be within an urban center.
Well, let's underscore that for a second.
Sure.
When you say we're in St. Petersburg, don't get a sense that we're off on the edge of town in some industrial park. We are right in the middle of downtown St. Petersburg. In fact, I'm staying 5 blocks from here in a hotel. I had my coffee right over there. And so there's this nondescript building from the 1930s that had been empty until Haddy came along and took it over. And you are now transforming this space into an experience center and a production center for furniture and other sorts of products right here in the middle of town. Tell us how that happens and why it's important.
The importance of Microfactory, period, is about being able to reinvent the way in which people access jobs and the way in which they access innovation, and then also the way in which they access sustainability from a point of view of material capture. So if you're far away from people, you can't do any of those things very well. In the old school way, and some of the time, the way in which you see things in other countries, people will build dormitories and they will try to create the city around the factory. We have looked at it in the other way, which is to say that if the factory can be profitable and productive, being small enough to be able to fit within where people live, which is in urban centers, then that means that the lift is much easier. But that critical if is if the factory can be small enough and profitable enough was something that wasn't accessible before in the large factory or manufacturing footprint.
So kind of rather than building the city around the factory, build the factory for the city.
That's right. That's exactly what it is. And so when we think about slotting a microfactory into a city, when I go around to that coffee shop or I go to the hotel to book rooms for people who come and visit, we know already that we are creating the indirect jobs that are around the factory. And each one of these businesses, the hotel, the coffee shop, the Pilates studio, all of them, they have sprung up around this microfactory since we've been here. Now, this was something that Bruce Katz talked about in The New Localism. This is something that we've seen in many other books that have talked about city reinvention from a point of view of urban planning.
Right.
But it was missing this piece of like, well, where are the jobs going to come from? Well, as you've talked about in proximity, and what this microfactory means is that this is an advanced manufacturing powerhouse that's quietly sitting next to the coffee shop and next to the hotel and being incredibly productive.
Right, and speaking of incredibly productive, you pointed out here, you've got, I believe, 8 fully operational robots, and these are the big scale, automotive industrial scale robots that are customized to do what you need them to do here. And you pointed out that you almost have more robots than you do people. But what's exciting about the people you have working here is they're highly skilled. They're really engaged. I was with you yesterday touring and meeting some of your staff members like Owen, who's all in. I mean, he's so excited about having the capabilities to do things at this scale with just a few collaborators that they could never have imagined even 5 or 6 years ago. So talk about a little bit about that dynamic of talent and automation, because I think people simplify it too much and they oversimplify it. So they say, well, the robots are going to take all our jobs. They're changing what's possible. Talk about that for a moment.
So looking back this in the scope of history, in the year I was born, the population of the Earth was roughly half of what it is today. So we sit in the middle of an exponential growth of people. Now that's your labor force, and it's also very much your consumption group of folks. And so when I think about where we have come to bring a microfactory and to provide the jobs, what we're doing is we are creating an inevitable lightning rod. And so when you talk about our teammates, they were born expecting this to be their future. We have to build it. So I'm going to say that again. When you take somebody who was born in the early 90s or the late 80s, which is pretty much our workforce age group at this stage, they expected growing up in the age of the internet for these kinds of businesses to exist. And so what it takes, though, is actually making them manifest. And so oftentimes people will say, what a great idea, incredible, I love seeing what you're doing. And that's very honorific. But more, the quote that sticks in my mind is that it's an overnight success of technology, just 20 years in the making.
Right.
And it really is that. I've been at this for well over 18 years trying to put this together. And today we're able to offer those jobs to those people that you were talking about who have expected it since they grew up in the early age of the internet. But it's taken this amount of time to get it to be manifest.
So let's back up to that origin story. From where did this Haddy thing come?
In the late 90s, I was in the Marine Corps, and I was doing a lot of reading. I had studied and lived all over the world. I had lived in China when manufacturing was taking off. And so for me, I was fascinated about what the future of factory development and making things was going to be. So I was already passionate about making things. I had been trained as a classical woodworker. I loved the way that creation and technology made creation possible. And I read a treatise that was talking about the origin of manufacturing in the age of the internet. And it surmised that there would be a time that the internet would drive a machine at a distant location and just use bits and send the information, and then the product would be made. It really wasn't possible.
Right.
The best way you could think about it was like a facsimile machine. Like I would send through a dial-up modem, and then it would make a piece of paper on the other end with printing, ink. And that was a beginning of these things. Then we saw 30 years of development of what I would consider to be very mature internet SaaS-based development, whether it was app-based or mobile phone-based, or whether it was computer, laptop, desktop-based development of software. We had people like Mark Andreessen that came out with these big quotes that were bombastic, like software is eating the world.
Right.
Well, the truth is that software was a necessary step in order to be able to consume and make the world in a different way. But the software isn't eating the world. I think Mark Andreessen was just naive in that beginning. And
Or he was stirring the conversation.
He was stirring the conversation.
Software is enabling you to create a different world.
Correct. And so maybe naive is the wrong word, just stirring the conversation and limiting people's view of what was going to come. And so today that is here in many, many industries, but not in all. And so where we are now, after we've expanded the internet capability, which really means the distribution, the amount of data that can be applied, the connection to the machines, the embodied agents that run the machines, it is now possible to power a machine at a distance with bits that have deep information, and then to send those back to the cloud for processing to be able to do it even better the next time.
Right, and if you have the production capability distributed all over the place, closer and closer to centers of demand, then you can send those data to exactly where the best place would be to produce that product, bringing down the cost of distribution, bringing down the risk of inventory, holding inventory, because you hold very little inventory. I like to say in proximity, the easiest demand to predict is one that already exists. And so your customers, tell me a little bit about some of your customers. They contact you and they'll say, I have an idea and I need a few examples of it to test it out. Fine. Or they might call and say, I need 28 copies of this thing, and you make them 28 copies. And it's economical and it makes money, which is almost impossible to do with traditional manufacturing modalities. So tell us about how this works.
It's close to straight up impossible, and to do it in a traditional way.
Right.
And so when we talk about being responsive to a customer need, businesses like this that are close to the point of consumption, that are close to the point of use.
Right.
These are the things that really are a key strategic element of a microfactory. And so when a customer says, I want, it often isn't them picking up a telephone and calling you and say, I want. What they're doing from an anthropologic point of view is they're just simply liking something on Instagram. And that now is so replete throughout, the ability to consume that information. What you're doing is you're looking at signals. And you're looking at the deepest signals. You're looking at color choices, or maybe the most occult. You're looking at color choices. You're looking at backgrounds. What is it that got them to say that they liked it?
Right.
And there's so much more opportunity there too. The question of smell and the question of touch and the question of other things that can't even be embodied in those. But when you're close in an experience center like this, you can begin to respond to the regional tastes, and then you can bring people in to come and see it.
And even individual desires. So with additive manufacturing, robotics, automation, all of which you're amping up here at Haddy, you can customize and make money. You can customize and respond to each individual customer's needs in a way that traditional manufacturing can't. But I'd like you to come back. You mentioned the Experience Center, which is actually where we are right now, and it's not quite ready for prime time. It will be in the next couple of months. So in a couple months, when I come back here to Haddy, what is this space going to be, and how does it relate to the production system going on in the next room?
This space, despite all the robotics and all the amazing things that happen in a microfactory, is almost certainly the most important of anything that we do. And so what it is it is a space of both indoor and outdoor locations. And what it does is it will sell what we do in a microfactory on its own without any words. So it was often said, that tell me about it and I'll forget. Show me and I'll remember. Let me take part and I'll fall in love. And so in this particular case, we want to start with the showing you and you'll remember. Yeah. And so in an experience center, it is our products. But what we're also doing is we're starting you out in that urban environment outside where you say, what is this? This box is special. So I go back to Roald Dahl when I think about that, and I think about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Here we are, post-war England. We are in an incredibly depressed society, apocryphally in the way that works. And you have this child who dreams, and he gets a golden ticket to go to a factory. That is exactly what you should experience when you're outside. No Oompa Loompas on the inside,
right.
But you will get the opportunity to come inside almost with that apocryphal golden ticket. And when you come from the outside and you experience our furniture, which is outdoor capable, you will see as you walk up the 3D printed stairs, and we can talk about those too, into the inside, that it is also indoor beautiful. And then when you walk into that indoor beautiful space, we will imbue that experience with generative AI backdrops. Now, it's important to disambiguate the idea of generative AI and AI-powered robotics. A lot of people just say, oh, I know AI because I use Midjourney or ChatGPT. Right. So a large language model or a stable diffusion model, which is taking either words and tokenizing them in a large language model place, or in the case of images where you're taking pieces of images and recombinating them, people often think that that is design. It is part of design, but it isn't the AI that powers our agents that drive our furniture. And we want to help people understand that. So when you walk inside this experience center, you will get generative AI images on backdrop screens that sit in front of our robotically produced furniture. And you will get multiple vignettes, like a museum, as you walk through our space here. Right. So you will have come from a microfactory in an urban environment to outdoor furniture. You will have walked up architecture, stairs that we printed, and then which will be resonant for historical architecture and design from Michelangelo, and then you will come inside and you will have a generative AI backdrop which represents stable diffusion, and then you will go through the 3D printed furniture and experience it all right here in this small 10,000 square foot space.
So Jay, Haddy has some extraordinary customers like Room and Board. You've got many of the largest architecture and design firms in the world that are coming to you to envision the future and create products. When a customer shows up here at your design center manufacturing site, what happens? What's their experience like?
Typically, our customers pull up outside, they walk through our furniture outside, they walk into this experience center inside, they get to see basically screens that show them their environment that they imagine their furniture in, with ideas of the printed furniture in front, and then we sit down and we talk about what is it that you really imagine, and their mind is already blown. But then when we finish talking, we walk them around the corner and they see our R&D robot printing the very thing that we were talking about. And then we go show them the production floor, where when that's finished, it's going to go into production. And by that moment, we're ready to go to business together.
Just to put a fine point on this, what you're saying is a customer comes, you have an interview conversation with them. What are you looking for? What's your vision for this new hotel or whatever it happens to be? And you're, meanwhile, feeding this into your generative AI system and showing them examples on a big screen. And they're saying, yes, this, more of that, none of that. You're editing with them real time. And then soon after, you walk into the next room and there's a prototype already being produced for them to respond to.
It's exactly right. We often say that Haddy powers ideas to markets in minutes.
Great, I love that. Haddy powers ideas to market in minutes, which, by the way, is something that's nearly impossible for a large traditional manufacturer to respond to.
So true.
And so a lot of these issues come from the constraints of the industrial age. We do things because that's the best we could do, pretty close. But now we can do things that we could never do before, and that's what you're doing here at Haddy.
Yeah, let's look at a little bit of the history of the furniture industry, which means for 200 years, from England to the colonies, to Taiwan, to China, and to Southeast Asia, we have simply chased lower labor rate, augmented by machines, saws, miters, other things like that, in order to be able to make furniture, and then we just let the shipping industry pick up the slack. And then IKEA came along and they said, well, I've got a better idea. Instead of actually finishing the furniture, we'll just keep it flat packed, and then you can put it together.
And we all know how that feels, by the way.
That is a little bit of a ruse,
yeah.
But it did something that was fundamentally different in the industry. And then comes Haddy. Haddy says, you know what, stop that whole chasing low labor thing. Let's get the robots to make the furniture. And then let's actually do one big move, one big shipment, which means we ship the robots to the places that are close to people within a 4 or 5 hour drive. And then we'll just send the bits by electrons across the world, and we'll have them trade ideas, but it doesn't cost anything, it's costless. And that is truly the first innovation in furniture manufacturing in 250 years.
So you have here in St. Petersburg, right downtown, in the middle of town, the first Haddy Microfactory, but your vision extends beyond, as you just mentioned, sending robots. Your vision is to build microfactories distributed across North America and perhaps elsewhere, closer to demand, to be more responsive, more engaged. I'd like you to talk a little bit about that longer term vision, but just to illustrate, earlier today I was talking to one of your team members, Owen, and he mentioned that you're making a product right now for a local coffee shop, a bar restaurant. And the owner of the bar restaurant came in and said, hey, what can you do for me? And you spun some things up, and he said, yeah, I want that. And so he's outfitting a new restaurant that he's opening purely with your furniture. That's something it'd be hard to imagine somebody going to a traditional factory who's opening one restaurant and saying, hey, I want some custom furniture. It can happen, but it's going to be expensive and it's going to take a long time. Whereas here, you're seeding this capability right here in the middle of St. Petersburg. Tell us about that vision.
Rob, what you just pointed out about that coffee shop owner coming to us is all that and even deeper. Here he is, he's been in the middle of the two biggest hurricanes we've ever had here, and he said, not only make me something that I like, I'm going to ask the impossible. Make me something that won't get destroyed like my coffee shop did in the next hurricane. And we did it for him. We took all of the things that he wanted and we made it both aesthetic and we made it survivable or durable.
Right.
So in that is really actually Haddy's name. So Haddy is an acronym and it stands for Heroic, Agile, Designed, Durable, and Yours. And if you think about that coffee shop owner, we were heroes for him. We were agile because we were able to provide it right away. It's durable because it can survive the next hurricane. It is designed for this incredible idea that he had, this flowing ribbon of air that comes through, and because it's on the beach, and it's yours, it's his. That's Haddy.
Great. So let's pan back to the transformation of the manufacturing space, which doesn't happen fast. These are global supply chains, massive investment over decades, but it's starting at the edges. And companies like Haddy seeing a different way, doing things we couldn't have done before. A lot of people look at additive manufacturing, and I know Haddy goes way beyond additive, but they look at 3D printing and they say, oh, see, there was a lot of hype. I told you this isn't going to work. What are they getting wrong?
In all businesses that are advanced manufacturing powered, and even in others, you have these things where you have these like hype cycles, and then you have these trough of disillusionments, and then you get the plane of enlightenment. That's the sort of consulting speak that comes along. And so we've had a couple of hype cycles. And really what happens is that in a stage one 3D printing business, which we've had for about 30 years, you have different technologies because 3D printing has lots of them. You have metal printing and you have different forms of printing. We could go through all the technical names. And the bottom line is that some of them have come of age sooner than others. In stage one, it basically meant I've got a new technology and it can make really cool things, but it's probably slow, it's probably expensive, it probably doesn't work all the time. So those businesses caused prototyping to really lurch forward, but they didn't really help manufacturing and product delivery and really like reliable production to go forward.
But for those who aren't in the manufacturing space, 3D printing is de rigueur for anybody doing prototyping or have lab work, product design, et cetera. That's been well proven for a couple of decades now. But as you just pointed out, it hasn't incurred that much into the production of products at scale worldwide. And it feels like we're at the knee of a curve here, like we're at the very beginning of that transformation.
Well, if I could maybe recast that just a little bit and say like up until about 7 years ago, it really hadn't gone into what I would call stage two, but then it did. And so where it started is, logically, it started in some of the higher priced areas. So we saw it in medical bone, knee, surgical implant replacements. So there started to be the ability to take a scan of your bone and make an implant for a skull cap or a new hip or other things like that. And
custom specifically for you. So there's a very high value and they're not worried about the price.
Correct. And the high value for the surgeon is they could look at it, they could get in there virtually, figure out how they're going to do the surgery. There were many benefits that were just an immediate uptake of that.
Great.
So we see a stage two business in that case where it's not so much the 3D printing, but it's the value you can offer to the customer.
So another example that many people would understand would be Invisalign. They take a scan of your mouth, they create your retainer, custom each time, extraordinarily high margins, but very effective in a way we couldn't have done it before.
What's interesting for that stage two business is they said, the orthodontist, hey, you take clay molds of people's teeth, you have to keep those on a shelf someplace, they get brittle, they break over time, and also you're kind of like putting in these wires and twisting them. It was an old way to move teeth. And they said, we have a better way. We have these really clean little trays. They have all these benefits to you aesthetically, but they also make something where you can digitally move someone's teeth by segments over 32 different trays. And all that was possible because they could 3D print 32 different versions of your mouth as they moved you toward the perfect smile.
Right.
That was a stage 2 business because it made it less expensive and it made it less painful, and it still kept the orthodontists in business. So it was powered by 3D printing, but the value was seen in the value chain downstream of that.
Well, if my orthodontist's new car is any indication, it did more than keep orthodontists in business. I'll tell you that. So let's shift to the robots, because I love technology, and I have to admit I like a shiny object. I walk in here and you've got these 8 state-of-the-art automotive quality robots that you're doing very fine work. And what have you learned so far about leveraging robotics and AI to create custom responses to customers?
So industrial robots, which is what we have, you mentioned automotive, they have been around for a while. They've been around for 20, 30 years. And so what we've learned is that use the robots that are reliable and work, and then refine them at the edge. Refine them with software, refine them with sensors and those sorts of things. So I love really what a robot means. A robot it's a Czech word originally. It came from ballet. And effectively what happens is it just means that I'm going to sense, analyze, and actuate. I am going to learn, know, and do. That's what robots do. And we use industrial robots to learn, know, and do to make furniture.
But that learning, knowing, and doing is in concert with your team. So the humans involved are actually creating a very simpatico relationship with these robots. And you don't just upload a file and push a button and it's done. There's actually a lot of edge work to be done, as you said. By the way, you've named all the robots. What's up with that?
Okay. So, I mean, the interaction with humans and robots is one of the most magical things that happens in a microfactory, because they're all around us, and we have as many robots as we have people. So we interact in a lot of ways. As far as naming our robots, it was just axiomatic that we were going to have to give them a human personality, because they really are part of us. They're reflections of what we do. And so I often hear that artificial intelligence isn't so much artificial, it is recombinated human knowledge. And so we named them. And we named them in the way that we want to be seen in the community. Our whole team named them. So our robots, the first 2 that we used were Tom and Jerry. There was a cat that caught a mouse in our factory, and we decided that we would tell a nicer story than the murder of the mouse in the factory. So we have 2 robots, Tom and Jerry, that chase each other around the factory, but they can never quite get each other. And that's the cartoon. So we started with Tom and Jerry, and then we had 6 more robots that joined the fold. And in order to make it easy, we wanted to kind of make them A through F, A, B, C, D, E, F. But we didn't want them just to be letters, because that's boring. So we gave each of them a name. And so Ada, after Ada Lovelace, the famous female mathematician, is robot number A, or robot letter A. And then B is Bumblebee, and that comes from Transformers. Everybody knows in modern times this movie that has this Volkswagen Beetle that sort of pops out into this friendly robot. That's Bumblebee.
And Jay, just to underscore this, your team members get together and come up with the names for these robots, right?
And then our robots print their name on their own
The
machine
robots
themselves.
ceremoniously print the name. And in fact, when I showed up yesterday, you happened to be printing Ada's name, and that happens to be my wife's name. So that was a beautiful coincidence.
That was synchronicity right there, wasn't it?
But I think this engagement of your team to build an identity with the robots, for instance, is reflective of the culture that you're building here at Haddy. Tell us a little bit about how culture relates to this automated business of the future.
With a future in front of us that is a global network of microfactories, we're inspired by way more than just what happens in St. Petersburg. We want to learn. One of our teammates is getting his PhD in Japan right now in Tokyo, and he was inspired by the Japanese train stations, where all the Shinkansen trains that come in have a different sound. What a wonderful thing to think about the lines of robots that we have, each one of them having a different sound. It announces to you that this robot has something to say, not that robot having something else to say. So the idea of a robot having a personality or having individualization made total sense to him coming from Tokyo, and we decided to adopt that. So not only do they have a different name, but they'll have different sounds.
So you're building an identity with them.
That's correct.
And that actually says something to us as human beings. It's almost like you're discovering meaning in the context of manufacturing.
As we go into the world of AI powering things, the question always comes back, what's a human good for? What's a pilot good for in a plane if there's autopilot?
Right.
And the things like, should I have a human in the loop? That's a phrase for, do I need a doctor or shall I just do robotic surgery? We are seeing that come of age right here in this factory, where we realize that design is an amazing place to see a human engaged. Setup of the robots so that they know how far they can reach and what they can do is a place where a human can really bring together a lot of disparate things like insurance, fire, mechanicals, other things like that, that the robot doesn't know it needs to care about. And so we have humans all around the edge. Jeff Bezos used to say, like, I want the Amazon machine in the middle to do all the scut work that humans don't really value. And then I want the humans at the edge where they're really valuable. We see that in our microfactories.
Actually, it reminds me of something that Andy Jassy at Amazon just said, and he said it in many ways before, which is, I want to get rid of that middle management layer, but not just to flatten the organization, but to lift up the notion of being an individual contributor. And I had the same conversation with Rick Smith at Axon a few months ago, where he and Josh Isner, their president, they're optimizing the company to be the place that extraordinary individual contributors want to be part of. They want to be part of a team where they can come up with big ideas and concepts and pilot them and trial them and get them out to market. And it's so, something about this automated future is enabling humans to do more and be more, and so, as opposed to replacing us.
Reaching our potential comes through, seen best through things like inspiration. We have those words. And, you know, my grandfather used to say, he was one of the co-founders of public television, and he was passionate about childhood education by reading to kids before they could speak. And so, and I never really understood it until I watch our people around here, where they're thinking about, like, wow, what could I make? And they watch a robot make something, and then they start to dream, they get inspired. And so for us, the interplay between robot and human is causing the human to work faster, and therefore it's powering the robot to do more. And that happens right around a microfactory. John Bassett, who was the grandson of the founder of Bassett Furniture, used to say that innovation lives at the factory doorstep. Close the factory, innovation dies. So a microfactory is a place where innovation thrives and human inspiration thrives.
Because you can make visions real, and you can generate new visions in a moment and see it happen soon after. So let's look out 5 years. Where is Haddy going?
In 5 years, Haddy is going to be making 2 million units of furniture a year across multiple cities in the world. What that means is that in 5 years, we're going to be as capable as some of the larger furniture companies in the world, but at a time scale that took them 5 decades or more to be able to get.
And at a level of customization, it'll be difficult for them to touch.
At an unseen level of customization for them. So we used to be told that there was a choice. You could have low mix, high volume, or high mix, low volume. Now you can have all those mixes together at any volume.
Well, that's one of the things that's most exciting to me about proximity in general, because we've always had, you could have it cheap, but it's going to be like a million other copies. Or you could have it custom, but it's going to be really expensive. For the first time since the Industrial Revolution, we're able to start breaking that trade-off between customization and efficiency. And that's what you're doing here.
I appreciate you telling that very clearly, because it's amazing how my mother, who knows very little about manufacturing, was just sort of raised and imbued with this idea that I can have a lot of the same thing cheaply, or I can have one of something and it's very expensive. You don't have to know manufacturing to be told that story.
It is a mindset that is a paradigm that is standing in the way of so many people seeing the future.
So true.
But when they come to a place like this, they'll start to figure out what's
That's
possible.
why we have an experience center, because we want them to be able to feel it on their own.
Well, so let's talk about those cities. In 5 years, you'll be at multiple cities around the world. So what's in it for a city when a microfactory shows up in town?
Oh, I want to say this very clearly. Cities are where people are, and those are the places where Haddy's microfactories are going to be. So for us, we're population driven. We need to be close to where people are. We want to see their tastes. We want to know their tastes. So for our growth in America, we started in the American Southeast. We're in Florida. Within a 5-hour drive, we can reach 30 million people here. And then we want to be seen in the Midwest. We want to be seen in the Southwest. We want to be seen in Southern California, the Pacific Northwest, the Mid-Atlantic, and New England. That's about 7 microfactories that gather the population of the United States and allow us to be able to fully expand a microfactory vision for furniture in America.
And each of those factories will have its own characteristics, its own customers, its own focus and expertise. But one of the things that's exciting about this kind of a model, Jay, is that those data, that information, that learning can be shared instantaneously across any of those factories. So if something that takes off in the Southeast turns out to be interesting in the Northeast or the Mid-Atlantic, it can instantly be sent and you can start producing wherever is most economical.
That's exactly right. I mean, effectively, as we've talked about a little bit, getting the heavy atoms to move once and then getting the electrons costless to be able to trade ideas anywhere is a really important thing. I took a page out of the book of the founder of Southwest Airlines. He was looking at all the other airlines and said, I want to give a great experience. And one of the ways I'm going to do that is I'm just going to have the same machine everywhere so that no matter where you go, you know how to sit and you know how to service it. So inside or outside.
I think that was the 737.
It was the 737.
Right.
And so we really took a page out of the book. We want the same robots and the same microfactory everywhere. Because then if you work for Haddy, any microfactory you go to, you can operate.
You walk
the same
in and
thing.
instantly you know what you're doing.
You know where the bathroom is, you know where the robots are,
Right.
you know where the experience center is. It's all the same.
Right, great. So in this process of building Haddy, what is something that has surprised you and what can we learn from it?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. There are so many things that have surprised me. And so I would say the best thing that has surprised me is that we can jam a room full of robots and have almost no people in it. When I started, I just wasn't sure how intense we could make things. And the real estate intensity of robots, we can really pack them in like cordwood. That's exciting. That's a surprise to me. Other surprises that have come out is that I really actually think that consumers have a much greater desire for design freedom and exciting new things than I ever gave them credit for. And I suppose when I look back in time, maybe I should have been more open to that, because really Mies van der Rohe was famous for saying form follows function, and I didn't understand it, but it makes sense in the world of Haddy because we changed the form. It's a 3D printed form. Pardon me, we changed the form. It's the furniture you see, but the function was 3D printing. And so for us, the form of what you can get as a consumer has absolutely followed the 3D printing function that's out there. And that's been a surprise to me just because I'd never seen it happen. And now it's here.
Jay, you're taking foresight and turning it into reality. You're making that future vision real. How do you stay ahead? What do you read? How do you stay informed?
I often call myself an accidental entrepreneur. And so for me, when I grew up, like if you would ask me, are you going to be a serial entrepreneur? I had no idea. And then somebody, a major impact in my life came and said, have you ever led anybody? And so I said, no. And he said, why don't you join the Marines? And so after a very short period of time, I did join the Marines. And the Marines have a lot of things that are hidebound, but there's one thing that is not hidebound in the Marine Corps, and that is that you are required to learn all the time. And you learn about your tactical environment. If you have an enemy that wants to kill you, you figure out really fast how to fix the situation so that you win and they lose. That's what we do as Marines. And so when I think about running Haddy, I brought a lot of those leadership lessons from the Marine Corps over here. And I broke them down to 14 leadership traits and principles. But if I were to talk about the ones that keep me current and keep me ahead, I read like crazy. And the reason is that the Commandant of the Marine Corps said, we will have no stupid leaders in the Marine Corps. So you're going to get out and you're going to read. And just that simple aspect of things, and then powering it also now with the ability to have learning and reading come from so many different things, has kept me ahead.
Well, and when you say reading, and I totally agree, Jay, you're not just talking about the latest business book, as wonderful as they might be. You're not talking just about reading about the future. You also look to the past. What are some books that have most impacted you personally and professionally?
Okay, so my library is made up of 17 shelves, and those shelves kind of talk about the books that I think. So when we think about some of the big ones, so George Packer, he wrote a book about Four Americas. That's an impactful book for me because it talked about some of the difficulties of a merit-based system and then what we're coming upon where we're leaving people behind and then other people are surging ahead with a wealth disparity.
Right.
That was impactful to me. When I read Alvin Toffler's book, The Third Wave, and then I saw Steve Case come in and really take it forward to the next level, that was deeply impactful for me.
So he took something that inspired you and he said, I'm going to try and make this happen in the real world.
That's exactly right. And so for me, that was a super inspiring book. Other books that I've read that really have inspired me are books that are not about anything around machines or other things like that, but imagination books. So Roald Dahl, for example. When I think about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and I think about what happened in a very depressed post-war England, how you could bring magic into a society, that was deeply impactful for me, because when you think about children and how they view their future, the optimism that they have makes all the difference in the world into what they're going to do. So that to me was super impactful. I read history. I read about leadership. Those things to me are very meaningful. So Marcus Aurelius, a lot of people talk about asceticism. A lot of people talk about being able to do that. But for me, learning from the wealthiest man perhaps ever in the world, the leader of the Roman Empire, and where he was going through campaigns where he was fighting in Gaul, and he was facing death every day. There's something about that when you're an entrepreneur where you may not face death every day, but you definitely face destruction of your company. Elon Musk, I read him because he says being an entrepreneur is like chewing glass and standing at the edge of an abyss. And it's true. In a very Marcus Aurelius kind of way, you are staring at the edge of the abyss and you are chewing glass because the distillation of the problems that come down always come to you as the CEO. So these are some of the things that I have read, and the list goes on. Maybe I'll add one more. I love reading about failure. I think that too often we forget things like the memento mori. We're always going to die.
Yeah.
You can define failure in many ways, but the important thing is to realize that life is short. And if other people have made mistakes or tread on landmines that they ought not to have tread on, there's a lot to learn from those.
So I couldn't agree more. And in fact, one of the things that strikes me in my life, one of the things that I engage with my students about is I'll see my students or maybe my children read something and say, oh my gosh, that's inspiring. Can you believe what she did? Can you believe what that guy thought about and went out and did? And I say, that's great, but you know what? You can try that too. Don't limit yourself by just being in awe of someone else who is in the arena, who went out and tried something and made it real. That's the essence of being an entrepreneur. Whether you're building a business or being entrepreneurial at a corporation or in a government setting, seeing something that's better and going out and striving to create it. That's where the magic is in life. So speaking of my kids and students and the future, what recommendations do you have for young people who are looking to this extraordinary opportunity ahead of us, also the threat and the challenge ahead of us? What advice do you have for them?
One of my professors, Howard Stevenson, used to say, I believe that being an entrepreneur is defined in one simple phrase. It is relentless pursuit of an opportunity with means currently beyond your control.
Relentless pursuit of an opportunity with means currently beyond your control.
He said it, and it was sort of like,
right.
Wow. And so when I think about young people and I come along, all of the tools are at their behest.
Yeah.
YouTube is free if you have access to a computer screen or a mobile device, which is pretty replete in our society.
Right.
And so the ability to be able to pursue knowledge and then to put it into action means that all you need is a relentless drive. So what I often say to young people, people who are young at heart, even if you've aged out of a permanent employment in Japan or other things like that, is that you can still be party to that entrepreneurship. It's relentless pursuit of whatever opportunity you see in front of you with those means that are currently beyond your control. That's one of the first things that I say when people say, I want to be an entrepreneur, but I'm not sure what I'm going to do. My answer is don't be an entrepreneur, because you need to know what is that opportunity that you're going after.
Right.
Once you have that, then you're ready to go.
Being an entrepreneur is not for everyone. I would argue it's not for most people, but being entrepreneurial is becoming a capability that we all have to master when things are moving and changing so fast. So, Jay, you mentioned memento mori. You take a very philosophical position to lots of things in life. How do you find meaning? What creates meaning for you in this journey?
That's a great question, Rob. So I find meaning through human connection. And I've learned that over time.
In a company filled with more robots than people, you find meaning in human connection.
It's pretty simple for me. a lot of people, I was for a long time, for decades, I was a person from anywhere. You know my story a little bit. My father moved us onto a boat when I was 12 years old, and we went around the world for 7 years. There were nobody else other than our family around us. And that was an incredible learning experience. But the most important part of that learning experience was meeting people all over the world. That human connection was really, it wasn't the vistas, it wasn't the stars at night at sea. It was communing with people who learned how to do navigation by the stars, communing with people in the Marquesas Islands who had known that Gauguin was there and painting. The connection between humans is what inspires me and drives me and brings things along. So I often find that when I'm on the road and I'm talking about Haddy, which happens a lot when I'm looking at other microfactory locations, when I'm talking to customers, it is the people that I run into and listening, actively listening to their desires, their passions, the things that they want to do. That's where I find meaning.
So, Jay, we're coming up to the end of this conversation. I hope it's not the last. Give us 3 words to describe how you feel about the future, and do not explain them. 3 words to describe how you feel about the future, and do not explain them.
Fast, optimistic, dreadful.
Fast, optimistic, dreadful. The flywheel is spinning up. We are here at Haddy creating an inevitable lightning rod for young people who see that the future can be created, and they're looking for places to do it. They're looking for places to do it in a world of proximity where literally anything will become possible anytime, anywhere, and that's not hyperbole. The question is, what role will you and your organization play in order to get there? Here at Haddy, they've decided to become heroic, agile, durable, designed, and yours. Robots are a part of this journey, but they're also a part of us. In fact, I'd add to that, Jay, and say that robots and artificial intelligence challenge us to ask, what kind of human do we want to become? Everyone tends to talk about, how do we make the AI more like humans? Is that really what we want? I think instead it allows us to supercharge those things that we have done because we had to, and select and aspire to the things that we desire to do, those things that hopefully create meaning. So what is a human good for? Well, one thing you underscored at the end, and I couldn't agree more, is that they're good for each other. They're good for us. And I would argue, even as we become hybridized with AI and robotics, which we will, there's not going to be a robot apocalypse. It's just going to be us against us, as it always has been. So let's create a world where it's better to be with us, where those human connections are the things to which we aspire. You mentioned Roald Dahl and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. One of my absolute all-time favorite films from the first time I saw it as a kid was Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And it was the moment when Gene Wilder, and I love the Johnny Depp version as well, when Gene Wilder walked out and sang, they opened the doors and he sang "A World of Pure Imagination." And if you read the lyrics of that brief song, they're actually quite profound. In a world of pure imagination, which is the world toward which we are heading, if you can imagine it, you can create it. This becomes no longer trite, this becomes real. Now think about this. One of the lines from the song is, if want to change the world, there's nothing to it. And in that coming world, that will actually be literal. Jay, thanks so much for having me here and for creating this coming world here at Haddy.
Rob, there's nothing to it.
Having spent 8 years in the Marines, Jay will know well about this tradition. In the US military, there's a tradition of what's called the challenge coin. And the challenge coin is an expression of appreciation, of honor, of gratitude. It's not an official medal, but it's something that every commander from colonel on up to the president has the opportunity to create and provide. And I learned about this tradition from Admiral Jim Stavridis, and I said, "Can I steal it from you?" And he said, I can't stop you. And I said, "Well, you probably can," but fortunately he didn't. So in my work around the world, Jay, meeting people with true vision, I decided I wanted a challenge coin specifically for visionaries. So I asked a visionary we both know quite well who introduced us, Brian Collins, the world's greatest brand designer, to design a challenge coin. And I unfortunately told him he could design anything he wanted. So of course, being a consummate designer, he designed something that was impossible to manufacture, but we did figure it out. So this challenge coin is a coin specifically for visionaries. So if you could see, it's shiny chrome plated coin. It's much larger than most challenge coins, and it has a horizon to it, a lifted space. This was the hard part to have manufactured in the old way.
Yeah.
And around the perimeter is a quote: "No borders, just horizons, only freedom," from Amelia Earhart. So I would like to confer this to you.
Thank you, Rob. That is truly, that's one of the most special gifts I think I've had. And the fact that it has Brian Collins and you embedded in it is, wow, that's very touching.
Right.
I don't even know how I'll display it, but I know that I will 3D print the way it is displayed. That's amazing.
Great.
Thank you. I'll place it right here for us so that it can I'm going to put it right there.
There is good.
There we go. We'll have the horizon receding.
Okay.
And I have received, as you know, many challenge coins in my life, and it's a very special thing.
It is.
And in fact, you've re-inspired me. I designed a challenge coin for the first time I was a general's aide for a really important strike group at the beginning of the war. And in doing it, the manufacturing process was so old to get it done because we were enameling the coin while we were carving it and that kind of thing. And then like just getting it, what it meant for people around the world as we went different places was really amazing.
Right.
So yeah, I know the process.
And it's a special tradition, expression of commitment and thanks. And I mean, these things are $4 or $5 each, but they mean so much more.
They do.
So,
they mean so much more. Really special. Thank you.